I'm Bryan Schneider with MidHudson Injury Law, and today we're going to talk about electric bikes and maybe a little bit about electric scooters. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you think they're a good alternative to cars, public transportation? Do you think they're safe? Or when you see them on the road, if you're driving, do they drive you nuts? Are you worried that someone's going to scoot out in front of you? Let's talk about some of the basics. For example, do they need to be registered? Do they need to be insured? What happens if you're in an accident with one of these, whether you're on one or you're driving a car and maybe you hit somebody? We'll talk about some of the basic rules here in New York. So there's different classes of electric bikes, 3 as far as I could tell. Generally speaking, a bicycle with an electric assist does not qualify for any registration needs, so you don't need to register them like you would a motorcycle or a car. They obviously have different equipment. Electric motors are different, or battery-operated motors are different than combustion engines, obviously. There are also limitations on where these electric bikes can be used. They can be used on roads roads with speed limits with a maximum of 30 miles an hour. However, that doesn't mean that they can use them on sidewalks, and I'm sure a lot of you, like myself, have seen that being done. I believe, although I don't know anything personally about this, that towns and villages and cities can also have their own regulations about the time and the place and the manner in which electric bikes can be used and operated. I'm not going to speak about any specific towns or villages here, but again, to those who are looking at this video online or at YouTube, for example, the rules I'm talking about pertain to New York State only. I can't speak about any other jurisdictions. What about seeing electric bikes on places like rail trails, which are common to the Hudson Valley? I have seen that more often than not when I'm taking walks or on my own bike, regular bike, but on pedal bike. I don't think there are any restrictions, but there are definitely signs I've seen on rail trails locally that prohibit motorized vehicle use, and whether that includes electric bikes. I suppose that could be the subject of some debate. If I had to guess, I would think that the rail trail organizations and their volunteers and the people who are in charge of maintaining it probably don't want to have any motorized vehicles on the rail trails, electric or otherwise, but not really sure. The thing that has personally bothered me the most when I've seen electric bikes on rail trails is that they're going really fast. And sure, there are plenty of cyclists and bicyclists that can pedal pretty quickly and fast as well, but naturally, to hit speeds of 20 to 25 miles an hour, pedal power only is much more difficult than just tapping a throttle and getting up to 20 and 25 miles an hour. There's also a legal minimum age in New York State for lawful operation of electric bikes. It's 16. I'm guessing, like myself, many of you have seen kids who are younger than 16 on these bikes on various places, streets, city streets, rail trails, bike paths. But again, the law requires any electric bike user to be at least 16 years of age. So let's just talk about the classification of these e-bikes, and that's going to become more important when we touch on some of the insurance subjects in just a few moments. So there are Class 1 bicycles, Class 2 bicycles, and Class 3 bicycles, and electric bicycles to be precise. So a Class 1 bicycle with an electric assist is something that provides assistance only when the person operating the bicycle is pedaling. And that ceases to provide assistance once the bike reaches 20 miles per hour. That's a Class 1 electric bike. Class 2 electric bike can actually provide the 20 mile an hour assist, but you don't need to pedal. And again, if you think about it, you've probably seen both of these style bikes. You'll see some people pedaling while they're just cruising along, and then you'll see some people on what just looks like a traditional bike, not pedaling at all, and just moving as they would if, say, they were operating like a moped. But they all have pedals. But those first two classes are limited to 20-mile-an-hour speeds. Then there's a Class 3 bicycle, which functions much like a Class 2, but they can get up to speeds of 25 miles per hour. And that's going to be important when it comes to the insurance stuff we're going to touch upon in a moment. So what happens when you're in an accident on one of these, or if you're involved in an accident, perhaps you're the driver and you hit someone who's riding one of these electric bikes? What kind of obligations attach here? Well, generally speaking, when you as a driver of a vehicle are involved in a personal injury accident or an accident that results in damage of more than $1,000, the law in New York actually requires you to fill out what's called an MV-104 report. And it's a report and a form and a template that looks very, very much like a regular police report might. And if any of you have ever been in an accident or you've seen these reports in other ways, this MV-104 report that has to go to the DMV in Albany looks almost identical to that. This requirement also attaches to people who are on an e-bike or even an e-scooter and are injured or obviously killed. That would be very serious. There are actually, I believe, misdemeanor consequences that attach to not providing this report. I can speak a little more in depth about whether or not that's something that's seriously enforced. I'll just comment that for the longest time with my regular personal injury auto accident caseload, I would routinely have clients sign these forms, which I would help them prepare for submission. But I have learned throughout my practice that the DMV isn't really cracking down on people who fail to follow this law. And maybe I could save that topic for another day, but I'm just reading to you for the purposes of this video shoot today, just the letter of the law and what's actually expected of people who are involved in accidents involving electric bikes. So if you're on an electric bike and you're hit by a car, who's going to pay for your medical bills? We've done a few videos in the past about no fault, so I'm not going to delve too much into that today, but no fault would likely apply to any electric bike operator who is struck by a vehicle as long as they're operating a Class 1 or Class 2 bike. That is those that do not exceed 20 miles per hour. So the offending car or the car that struck you as an electric bike rider would be responsible here in New York for extending their no-fault coverage to you. And that's very similar to what would happen if you were struck as a pedestrian or struck as just a regular pedal bike operator. That's household, like that's very well established. But the classification and the type of electric bike that a rider is on when hit by a vehicle definitely becomes something that's scrutinized by the insurance companies. And I've had a couple of cases where their investigation got pretty intense and involved something called an examination under oath. And an examination under oath is really, just another fancy term for a deposition. The insurance policies or the contract language in the policies actually gives the insurance companies the right to question even their own policyholders about the circumstances of an accident if they feel it's warranted. And a lot of that goes to what's called a coverage investigation. Before the insurance companies even want to pay on no-fault medical bills and maybe lost wages and other out-of-pocket expenses, if they feel that there might be a way to kind of get out of responsibility for these bills, they do an investigation, and oftentimes that involves one of these examinations under oath where they're going to basically ask my clients or perhaps the injury victims to explain the nature of the accident, and let's talk about the bike and what kind of bike is it, and do you have the manual, and do you have receipts? They want to look into that, because if you're operating one of those Class 3 bikes, As crazy as this may sound, it could be something that's more akin to a motorcycle. And motorcycles are not entitled to no fault coverage. And by that, I mean this: you can't insure it with any auto carrier that would provide no fault. And if you're struck by a car operating one of those class 3 level electric bicycles, you're probably not going to be covered by that offending car's no fault coverage. I've had that happen. I had a case involving a young man who was on an electric bike that definitely could go pretty fast. I think he actually rigged it so it could go upwards of 30 miles an hour. And that was one of those situations where the insurance company for the car that hit him, and there was no question that my client at the time did not cause the accident. Someone pulled out in front of him when he had the opportunity to see him approaching, and they did not care. The insurance company required all manner of documents from my client and I to detail the nature of the bike, the manufacturer of the bike, and they even, and rightfully so, because it was true that my client did this. My client actually removed a governor on the speed for this electric bike. And once the insurance company saw that, that was all she wrote. They denied no fault coverage. My client was unable to get his medical bills covered and paid by the no fault carrier. And in that instance, it actually squashed the case. It never got off the ground because my client had no other means to pay for his bills. He did not have any other medical insurance available to him. So it can be really, really critical if you have a case of significance. Now, thankfully, in this one particular case that I've been discussing, my client escaped the most serious injuries. I mean, he was unquestionably banged up and sore, but uh, he was fortunate. So it wasn't the end of the world for him, although it was, it was disappointing. He definitely wanted to get some care and coverage. He just had no way to pay for it otherwise. But by his own admission, like, he was able to carry on and get along. It just was, he wasn't at 100%, but it was something that, yes, in a perfect world, he would have had coverage for, and then maybe something could have been done for him from a personal injury case standpoint. So if you run into those situations, though, if you're on one of these class 3 bikes and you're free of fault, or the accident is, let's just say more the fault of an offending vehicle driver, and you have no coverage, does that mean you have no case? No, not at all. So it just might mean you have to rely on your private or personal medical care insurance, whether it be something you have through a job, or even if you're a Medicaid recipient. And we've talked about Medicaid a bit in previous videos as well. All that means, though, if it's Medicaid, for example, is that the government may have to be repaid from any settlement or recovery that I make on your behalf. So if you have a serious injury or something that definitely requires care, but you're not going to be covered by no fault, and you have other insurance for medical purposes available to you, yes, I'm going to tell you to make use of them and take care of yourself first and foremost. And then we'll worry about reimbursement or medical liens, at the end of the case. It should not be a reason to not go forward. Naturally, though, there has to be real fault from an offending driver. So switching up and talking about what drivers who come into contact with electric bicyclists should do, well, quite frankly, they should treat it as they would any other auto accident, or an accident with a pedestrian, or accident with a pedal bicyclist. Definitely call the police. Definitely take photos if you feel that's important. If you're trying to preserve evidence, for example, this information is pretty commonplace no matter what side of the coin that you're on here. But I would, if I'm a driver, and if you think something funky was up with the operation of the electric bike, or maybe you have some suspicion that electric bike has been, we'll say, souped up or rigged in a way to go faster, or modified in a way that maybe takes it outside one of those class 1 or 2 designations, yeah, take photos of the bike, take photos of the battery or the motor. your insurance company is going to want that information. But being as I'm in the business of helping people who are, typically injured on the wrong side of these accidents, yes, I focus on trying to help those who have been hurt. And, that gives you some pause. I understand. But at the end of the day, when you get badly hurt, and that often happens when you're talking about anyone who's hit by a car on any sort of bike, electric assist or not, the injuries can be severe. And that's my focus. And those are the people that I've made a living trying to help, and successfully so. And that's what I want to focus on with these videos. But I'm perfectly aware that people might be looking at this with a different slant or perspective. And I understand that. I get it. It's the way of the world. That's pretty much the end of this for today. We might be expanding on this further. I didn't really get into the electric scooter stuff, but a lot of the things that I shared when it comes to the class 1 and class 2 bikes kind of applies to the electric scooters. But again, just be wary if you're making any modifications or serious changes to these things that might take them outside those class designations, because you could be jeopardizing your ability to get medical coverage. God forbid you're on the wrong side of one of these accidents.